A 17-year-old girl flying alone is publicly humiliated by a gate agent. She's forced out of her paid-for seat and ordered to the back of the plane right next to the lavatory. The reason, the color of her skin. The agent smirks, thinking she's won. But she just made the biggest mistake of her career. Because as the plane is delayed, the pilot walks out of the cockpit, his face like thunder. He scans the cabin, finds the girl, and seconds later he recognizes her father's name. And that's when the hard karma begins. The air in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport Concourse T was thick with a familiar cocktail of anxiety and stale Cinnabon. 17-year-old Maya Washington clutched the strap of her backpack, the worn canvas a familiar comfort. This was her first time flying solo. Not just solo, but flying towards her future, a prestigious summer STEM program at MIT, a scholarship she had bled sweat and coded for. Her phone buzzed. A text from her dad. Landed at Logan. Maya smiled. Still in Atlanta, Dad. Flight 714 doesn't board for 30 minutes. You're 3 hours early. A good general is always early. Check your 6. Be smart. Call me when you land. Love you. Love you too. Her father. James Washington was a man of precision, a retired 2-star general who now ran a high-level logistics consultancy. He had raised her with a gentle but firm code: be prepared, be respectful, and never, ever let anyone make you feel small. She approached the podium for Apex Air Flight 714 to Boston. Her ticket, purchased months ago, was for 8A, a window seat in the Comfort Plus section. Her dad had insisted. "You've earned a little leg room," he'd said. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s, with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read, Susan Miller, was typing furiously, her face a mask of sour disapproval at the world. "Next," she snapped, not looking up. Maya stepped forward. "Hi, I just have a quick question about..." Susan Miller's eyes flicked up, taking in Maya's dark skin, her neat braids, and her NASA hoodie. The agent's thinly penciled eyebrows rose in a look that wasn't quite a sneer, but wasn't a smile either. "Question about what boarding hasn't started." "Oh, I know," Maya said politely, holding out her phone with the digital boarding pass. "I just wanted to confirm my seat 8A. Susan's fingers stopped typing. She looked at Maya, then at the screen, then back at Maya. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across her face. 8A. "Oh, honey, no. That's not right. I'm sorry." Maya's stomach did a small, cold flip. "We've had an equipment change." Susan lied, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "A smaller aircraft. Your seat assignment? It's been voided." "Voided. But I have a confirmation." "Everyone has a confirmation, dear," Susan said, cutting her off. She began typing the clack, clack, clack of the keys, sounding like tiny hammers of doom. "The system has reassigned you. It's just what happens." She ripped a piece of flimsy paper from the printer. "Here." Maya looked at the new boarding pass. Seat 34E. 34E, Maya said, her voice rising slightly. That's the last row. In the middle. That, Susan said, her voice turning to steel, is the only seat we have available for you. We need to reserve the premium cabins for our actual platinum members and full-fare passengers. The implication was clear. You are not one of them. You don't belong here. A man behind Maya, a large man in a business suit, huffed impatiently. Can we get this moving? Ma'am, please, Maya pleaded, feeling her face heat up with embarrassment. My father paid for 8A. I have the receipt. It's— You are holding up the line, Susan snapped. Her gaze was cold, triumphant. Your choice is simple. You can take seat 34E, or you can take the next flight, which might be tomorrow. What's it going to be? All the eyes in the boarding area seemed to be on her. The businessman, the college students, the family with the screaming baby. They all saw a black girl arguing with a white woman in a position of authority. Maya knew with crushing certainty how this looked. She remembered her father's words. Don't make a scene. Defeated, she snatched the paper ticket from Susan's hand. Fine. That's what I thought, Susan muttered loud enough for Maya to hear. Enjoy your flight. Maya moved away, her entire body trembling with a mixture of rage and profound humiliation. She found a seat against the wall far from the podium and pulled the hood of her sweatshirt over her head, trying to become invisible. The tears came hot and angry. She was just a kid, and this woman had wielded her tiny scrap of power like a weapon, all because she looked at Maya and decided she wasn't worthy of seat 8A. She wouldn't text her dad. Not yet. He would move heaven and earth, call the airline president, and probably try to deploy a small battalion. This was her problem. She would swallow it. She would endure the 5-hour flight in the worst seat on the plane, and she would survive. But as she watched the Platinum members board, she saw Susan smile and greet a white couple. She heard them say, "We were on standby. We weren't sure we'd get on." Susan leaned in conspiratorially. "Oh, don't you worry. I found you 2 much better seats, 8A and 8B. Have a wonderful flight." Maya's blood turned to ice. It wasn't an equipment change. It wasn't a system error. It was malice. It was theft. And it was, she knew deep in her gut, racism. Susan Miller had looked at her, a black teen, and decided she was an easy target to bump for her friends or preferred passengers. The humiliation morphed into a cold, hard stone of anger in her stomach. The call for Group 5 felt like a final insult. Maya was one of the last to board her backpack, now feeling like it was full of bricks. She shuffled down the jet bridge, the flimsy 34E ticket feeling damp in her hand. When she stepped onto the aircraft, a flight attendant named Mark Jennings, a man with a clipboard and an air of supreme self-importance, gave her a plastic-thin smile. "Welcome aboard." As Maya passed the front galley, she looked to her left into the first-class cabin. It was a different world. Then she entered the main cabin and approached row 8. The standby couple, the ones Susan had favored, were settling in. The woman was laughing, placing a small designer bag under the seat. Maya's seat. The man glanced up as Maya paused, her eyes lingering on the 8A on the bulkhead. "Can I help you?" the man asked, not unkindly. "No, I thought this was my row." Maya mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. "Ma'am, you're blocking the aisle," Mark, the flight attendant, said sharply from behind her. Maya flinched and hurried on. The walk from row 8 to row 34 was the longest walk of her life. She passed the comfort class seats, the regular economy seats, and then finally the seats that seemed to be bolted directly to the rear galley wall. Seat 34E was exactly as advertised. It was a prison, a non-reclining middle seat wedged between a man who already smelled faintly of airport bar whiskey and a young mother who was desperately trying to shush a wailing infant in the window seat. Behind her, the whoosh and clack of the lavatory door was already a drumbeat of her new reality. The smell of blue chemical disinfectant was overpowering. She squeezed past the man, her "excuse me" swallowed by the cabin noise. She sat down, her knees pressed hard against the seat in front of her. She was tall for her age, and the fit was agonizing. She jammed her backpack under her feet, leaving no room for her own. She pulled out her phone for the last time before the door closed. She couldn't help it. She texted her dad. "On the plane. It's not great." They moved my seat. "I'm in the very back. It's fine, don't worry. I'll explain when I land. What moved where. Call me. Can't. They're closing the door. It's fine, Dad. Really. I'm okay. See you in Boston. Love you." She put her phone on airplane mode and shut her eyes, willing herself to disappear. The plane finished boarding. The man on her right in 34D was already snoring softly. The baby in 34F was not. Maya put in her earbuds, but the cheap airline-provided ones did nothing to block the sound. The head flight attendant, a kind-looking woman named Jennifer, went through the safety demonstration. Then the pilot's voice came over the PA system. "Good morning, folks. This is your Captain David Harris speaking. Welcome aboard Apex Air Flight 714, with service to Boston. We're just finishing up our final checks with the ground crew and, well, folks, it looks like we're going to have a slight delay." A collective groan filled the cabin. "Seems we have a manifest discrepancy," Captain Harris continued. His voice was calm, professional, but with an underlying edge of gravel. "There's a weight and balance issue. Someone who's supposed to be on this plane isn't in the right seat, and it's throwing off our numbers. We're going to have to hold at the gate while we sort this out. Shouldn't be more than a few minutes. Flight attendants, please cross-check your cabin." Maya's heart hammered. A manifest discrepancy. In the front, Mark Jennings rolled his eyes. "Always something," he muttered to Jennifer. Jennifer picked up her tablet. "Well, let's start from the top. I'll take the port side, you take starboard." "Fine." Mark sighed, and he started his way down the aisle, his tablet in hand. He didn't check faces. He just scanned seat numbers. 1D1F, 2D2F. He worked his way back, his voice, a monotone drone. The baby next to Maya had finally cried itself to sleep. The man in 34D was now leaning onto Maya's shoulder in his slumber. She sat pinned, miserable and trapped. Finally, Mark reached the back row. He looked at the man. 34D check. He looked at Maya. 34E. He looked at his tablet. He frowned. "You're 34E?" He asked, his tone skeptical. "Yes," Maya said. "Boarding pass," he demanded, holding out his hand. Maya fumbled her hands, shaking as she tried to pull the flimsy paper from her pocket. She handed it to him. He looked at it. Then he looked at his tablet again. He tapped the screen aggressively. "The system has you in 8A. She... The gate agent," Maya stammered. "Susan Miller. She moved me. She said it was an equipment change and she gave me this." Mark sighed a long, put-upon sound. "For God's sake. Now I have to walk all the way up to the front and tell them. This is why we're delayed. People can't just sit where they're assigned." "But she assigned me this," Maya said, her voice cracking. "Whatever," Mark said. He turned and marched up the aisle. Maya watched him go, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. She was the problem. She was the manifest discrepancy. She was the reason 300 people were going to be late. She saw him lean into the cockpit, which was just visible from her back row perch. He spoke for a moment. Then he was silent, listening. Then he stepped back, his face visibly pale. He turned and looked. No, stared. All the way down the aisle, his eyes landing directly on Maya. He looked terrified. A moment later, The head flight attendant, Jennifer, appeared. She hurried down the aisle, her face a mask of professional concern. She knelt in the aisle next to Maya's seat, ignoring the sticky-looking patch on the carpet. "Miss," she said, her voice soft. "Are you Miss Maya Washington?" "Yes," Maya whispered. Jennifer's eyes were kind, but intensely curious. "Miss Washington, is your father by any chance General James Washington?" The man in 34D snorted himself awake. The whole back row was listening. Maya's heart stopped. She had no idea how this woman would know that. "He is," she said. Jennifer's face changed. It wasn't awe or fear. It was recognition and something else. A dawning, horrified understanding. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. She touched her earpiece. "Captain, you need to hear this." "Yes." She stood up. "Miss Washington, please, don't move. I'll be right back." She practically ran to the cockpit. The cabin was no longer restless. It was silent. The palpable shift in energy was a physical thing. Passengers who had been buried in books or headphones were now looking around, sensing the drama. They had all seen the head flight attendant sprint to the cockpit. They had all seen Mark Jennings, the rude attendant, standing near the galley white as a sheet, looking back at Maya. Maya just sat there, pinned in 34E, her mind racing. How did they know her dad? He was retired. He wasn't a celebrity. He was just Dad. A dad who had commanded men in combat. A dad whose name apparently meant something. The cockpit door opened. It wasn't a flight attendant who emerged. It was the captain. Captain David Harris was tall, with short-cropped salt and pepper hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore his uniform not as a costume, but as a second skin. His captain hat was off, tucked under his arm, and his 4 gold stripes gleamed in the cabin light. He didn't look angry. He looked cold. A type of cold, focused intensity that Maya recognized instantly. She'd seen that look on her father's face. The plane was silent. The thunk of the captain's shoes on the aisle carpet was the only sound. He didn't stop in the front. He didn't pause in Comfort Plus. He walked the entire length of the aircraft, his eyes fixed on the back row. Every passenger turned to watch him. It was a procession of one, and it was terrifying. He stopped in the narrow aisle directly in front of Maya's row. He didn't look at the man in 34D or the mother in 34F. His eyes, a sharp, piercing blue, locked directly onto Maya. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, then at the flimsy paper ticket in her lap, then back at her face. "Are you Maya Washington?" he asked. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Yes, sir," Maya whispered. "And your father is James Washington, General, from the 501st Air Refueling Wing." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Yes, sir," Maya said, her voice a little stronger. "He's retired now." Captain Harris's face softened for just 1 second. A flicker of something, a memory. Then the cold focus returned. "Mom," he said, and the word was a hammer blow of respect. "What are you doing in seat 34E? I was assigned it," Maya said, her voice trembling. "The gate agent. She said my original seat was gone. 8A. She said it was an equipment change. She put me here." The captain's eyes flicked to the lavatory door, then to the non-existent space between Maya's knees and the seat in front of her. His nostrils flared, taking in the smell of disinfectant and stale air. He looked at the man in 34D, who was now wide awake and trying to shrink into his seat. He looked at the baby now stirring in 34F. "An equipment change," the captain repeated, his voice flat. He knew, and Maya knew, it was a lie. The aircraft they were on was the exact 737-900ER that had been scheduled. He held out his hand. "May I see your original boarding pass, Ms. Washington, the one on your phone, and the one the agent gave you?" Maya's hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped her phone. She unlocked it and pulled up the QR code for 8A. Then she handed him the paper ticket for 34E. He looked at the phone. He looked at the paper. "Mark," he barked, not even turning his head. Mark Jennings stumbled out of the rear galley. "Yes, Captain. Who is in seat 8A? "A Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, sir." "Are they platinum members? Full fare, first class?" "Did they pay for that seat?" I don't know, Captain. They were gate assigned." "Gate assigned," the captain said. The words hung in the air. So they were standby. I assume so, sir," Mark stammered. Captain Harris turned his gaze back to Maya. It was gentle now. "Ms. Washington, your father, General Iron Hand Washington. He was my commanding officer at Kandahar. He's the reason my unit made it home. He's the reason I'm alive." Maya's jaw dropped. "A general's daughter does not sit in the back row middle seat on my aircraft," Captain Harris said, his voice rising now, meant for the entire cabin. "Not while I am in command." He held out his hand to her. "Ma'am, on behalf of Apex Air, I apologize. This is not how we do business. Please come with me." The man in 34D practically climbed the wall to get out of the way. Maya, stunned, took the captain's hand. He helped her into the aisle. "Grab your bag," he said. She fumbled for her backpack. He took it from her, slinging the NASA-themed bag over his own broad, uniformed shoulder, as if it weighed nothing. And then, in front of 300 passengers, Captain David Harris began to escort Maya Washington, the 17-year-old girl he'd found in the worst seat on the plane, back up the aisle. The walk of shame was now a walk of honor. The passengers stared, speechless. Some were already filming on their phones. As they passed row 8, the captain paused. He looked at the standby couple in 8A and 8B. They looked terrified. "Sir, ma'am," he said to them, "you're in the wrong seats. We'll sort this out. But for now, stay put." He didn't take her to 8A. He didn't take her to Comfort Plus. He walked her straight past the galley, through the curtain, and into the first-class cabin. He stopped at seat 1A, a large plush leather seat with its own TV screen and more legroom than Maya's bedroom. "This was my jump seat reserved for a deadheading pilot," he said. He missed his connection. "It's now yours, Ms. Washington." He placed her backpack carefully at her feet. "Jennifer," he called. The head flight attendant was right there. "Captain, Ms. Washington will be our guest in 1A. She gets whatever she wants. Pre-departure beverage, hot towel, the full service. Do you understand me?" "Absolutely, Captain," Jennifer said, smiling at Maya. "Ma'am, can I get you a water? An orange juice?" "Water? Water would be great," Maya stammered, sinking into the seat. "You got it," Jennifer said. Captain Harris gave Maya a short, respectful nod. "Please get comfortable. I have a phone call to make." He turned and walked not back down the aisle, but straight into the cockpit. The door clicked shut, but not before Maya heard him pick up the radio. "Get me Susan Miller at gate T12, now!" The cockpit of a 737 is a soundproofed sanctuary, but the tension inside could have been cut with a knife. Captain Harris strapped himself back into the left-hand seat. His first officer, a young man named Ben, looked at him wide-eyed. "What's going on, Captain?" Ben asked. "Injustice, Ben. That's what's going on," Harris said, his voice a low growl. He adjusted his headset. "And we're going to fix it." He clicked the radio. "Apex Operations. This is Captain Harris, Flight 714, still at the gate at T12. I need to be patched through to the gate agent on duty, Susan Miller. Confirm." A crackle. Then a voice from the ops center. 714, we confirm. Patching you through to the agent's desk. Stand by." There was a click, and then the tinny voice of the woman who had ruined Maya's day filled the cockpit. "This is Susan at T12. Go ahead, Captain." Her voice was breezy, annoyed, as if he were interrupting her. "Ms. Miller, this is Captain Harris," he said. His voice was dangerously calm. "I'm looking at a manifest discrepancy, and it all seems to trace back to your podium. Can you explain to me why passenger Maya Washington, confirmed ticket for 8A, was forcibly moved to 34E? There was a pause. "Oh, that," Susan said, her voice tightening. "We had an operational need, Captain. A late-breaking equipment swap. The system automatically reseated." "Stop," Harris said. The single word was so sharp, it made the first officer jump. "Stop lying, Ms. Miller. I'm looking at my flight plan. We've had no equipment swap. This is the 737-900 ER we were scheduled for. So I'll ask you again. Why did you move a confirmed full-fare premium cabin passenger to put a non-revenue standby couple in her place?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "Captain, I don't know what you mean," Susan stammered. "The Petersons, they were friends of yours, Susan, weren't they?" Harris guessed, his voice dropping. "You were doing them a favor, and you chose a 17-year-old girl, flying alone, to be your victim. You took her paid seat, humiliated her, and stuck her next to a lavatory for 5 hours." "You can't prove that," Susan shrieked, her professionalism gone. "It was a system glitch. I was just doing my job. You pilots think you run the show, but—" "Ms. Miller," Captain Harris interrupted, his voice now pure ice. "I am the show. My name is on the side of this aircraft, and I am the final authority for the safety and well-being of every passenger on it. And you, ma'am, have compromised the integrity of my flight. You have committed at minimum passenger fraud by swapping a paid ticket for a non-revenue standby. And you did it, I suspect, based on the passenger's age and race. You can't say that that's slander. Is it? I have 300 witnesses who just watched me retrieve this young woman from the humiliation you forced on her. I have a flight attendant who will testify to your rudeness at the gate. And I have the passenger herself, Miss Maya Washington." He paused, letting the name hang in the air again. "And perhaps, Ms. Miller, you're not aware, but Ms. Washington is the daughter of General James Iron Hand Washington, a man I served under. A man who is, shall we say, a very high-value consultant for this airline's new DoD cargo contracts." The radio went completely, utterly silent. The whoosh of the air conditioning was the only sound. Susan Miller was for the first time speechless. She was realizing she hadn't just bullied a teenager. She had kicked a hornet's nest. A very, very big hornet's nest. "Captain Harris," Susan's voice was a reedy whisper. I can fix it. I can move the Petersons." "You will do nothing, Ms. Miller," Harris commanded. "The Petersons are staying in 8A and 8B for the duration of this flight. They will be interviewed by corporate security upon landing in Boston, as will you. Your terminal access is revoked, effective now. You are to be relieved of your post. A supervisor is already on their way to your gate. Do you understand? Me. My job. Your job is the least of your worries, Miss Miller. You messed with the wrong passenger. And you messed with the wrong captain. Harris out. He clicked off the radio and turned to his first officer, Ben, who looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Ben, Harris said, all business. Run the pre-flight check. We're already late. Let's get this bird in the air. Yes, Captain. Harris then clicked the PA for the cabin. Folks, this is your captain again. My sincere apologies for the delay. We had a serious personnel matter that needed to be addressed. It has been. We are now cleared for departure. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for takeoff. In 1A, Maya was holding a cold bottle of water, a hot towel resting on her hands. Jennifer, the head FA, had also brought her a small box of first-class chocolates. You okay, honey? Jennifer asked softly. Maya looked up, her eyes still wide. I think so. Did all that just happen? It did. Jennifer said, her eyes glinting with a fierce satisfaction. And let me tell you, Susan Miller at that gate has had this coming for a long, long time. We've all filed reports. You were just the final straw. You should be proud. You're tougher than you look, Ms. Washington. For the first time all day, Maya smiled. A real, genuine smile. My dad says that too. The flight to Boston was for Maya surreal. The 5-hour journey she had been dreading was now comfortable. More than comfortable. She had watched a movie, eaten a surprisingly delicious meal of chicken piccata, and had a small, warm molasses and chocolate chip cookie for dessert. Jennifer was attentive and kind, checking on her regularly. But the real drama was still unfolding. The ripple effect of Captain Harris's actions spread through the plane. The standby couple. The Petersons in 8A and 8B were in a state of quiet panic. They knew they were in trouble. They had accepted the seats from their friend Susan, knowing it was a bit naughty, as Mrs. Peterson put it. They didn't speak. They didn't order drinks. They just sat rigid for the entire flight, awaiting their fate. The rude flight attendant, Mark Jennings, was a ghost. His public dressing down by the captain, followed by the captain's retrieval of Maya, had shattered his bravado. He was relegated by Jennifer's quiet but firm order to the rear galley. He didn't serve passengers. He washed plastic cups and restocked the soda drawer. His career, he knew, was on thin ice, and he had a terrifying meeting with Captain Harris to look forward to on the ground. Every time a passenger used the rear lavatory, they saw him hiding in the galley, his face a mask of shame. The passengers. The plane was abuzz. The story passed in whispers, and over the in-flight chat system had spread. The girl in 1A, she was shoved in the back. The pilot knows her dad, an army general. The gate agent got fired on the radio. Phones that had filmed the captain's walk were re-watching the footage. Maya was now an urban legend, a symbol of justice. When she got up to use the first-class lavatory, the people in the front of the main cabin smiled at her. An older black woman in row 4 reached out and touched her arm as she passed. "You hold your head high, child," she whispered. The captain, Captain Harris, remained in the cockpit. He was flying the plane. But he had also been busy on the secondary radio communicating with Apex Corporate. He had filed a formal incident report, known as a captain's report, which in the airline world carries the weight of a legal affidavit. He detailed in precise military-like language Susan Miller's actions, the clear evidence of discrimination, and the fraud. He attached the names of the standby passengers and the flight attendant Mark Jennings as co-parties to the incident. He was, as he had told Maya, building a case. Her father had taught him to never enter a battle without overwhelming force. As they began their descent into Boston, Captain Harris's voice came over the PA one last time. "Folks, we're on our final approach to Boston Logan. We'll be on the ground in about 20 minutes. I want to thank you for your patience today in Atlanta. It's not every day we have to correct a situation so publicly. But at Apex Air, we believe in integrity. We believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. And we believe that every single passenger from 1A to 34F deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." His eyes, Maya imagined, were on the plane's small rear-view camera, looking right at Mark Jennings. "On a personal note," he continued, "we have a very special guest in 1A today, Ms. Maya Washington. She's on her way to a prestigious STEM program at MIT. She's the kind of future we should all be supporting. We wish her the best of luck." The plane applauded. It started in the front and moved back. A warm, genuine round of applause. Maya's face turned bright red, but she was smiling, her eyes shining. "We'll be at gate B24, the captain concluded. "And as a final note, I will be deplaning first along with Ms. Washington to greet some people waiting for us. The rest of you please remain seated. Thank you for flying Apex Air." This was not standard procedure. The cabin buzzed again. Greet who? Maya's heart hammered. Her dad. Her dad was going to be at the gate, and he was going to be there with the captain. This was far from over. The plane touched down at Boston Logan with the gentle precision only a former military pilot can achieve. As it taxied to the gate, Maya gathered her things, her hands shaking again, but for a different reason. The seatbelt sign pinged off. "All passengers, please remain seated," Jennifer's voice announced. "The captain will be deplaning first." The jet bridge connected with a heavy thud. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Harris emerged, his hat now firmly on his head. He nodded to Maya. "Ready, Ms. Washington?" "Ready, Captain," she said. He walked to the main aircraft door and waited as the ground crew opened it. He stepped into the doorway, looked out, and then a slow, respectful smile spread across his face. "He's here," he said to Maya. He stepped onto the jet bridge. Maya followed her backpack on. Waiting in the gate area just beyond the podium stood two men. The first was a man in an expensive but rumpled suit, his face pale and sweating. He held a tablet and was shifting his weight nervously, looking for all the world like a man about to face a firing squad. This, Maya guessed, was the Apex Air corporate representative. The second man was her father. General James Iron Hand Washington, retired, was not in uniform. He was in a simple pair of jeans, a black polo shirt, and a light jacket. But he stood with a stillness that seemed to draw all the light in the terminal toward him. He was tall, powerfully built, and his face was calm. It was the calm of a man who has seen true chaos and finds it unimpressive. He was not looking at the suit. He was looking at the plane. His eyes found Maya. The calm broke, and a warm smile lit his face. But as she walked closer, his eyes flicked to the man in uniform beside her. His smile faded, replaced by a look of sharp, sudden recognition. Captain Harris stepped forward and stopped 3 feet from him. He snapped to an attention stance, his heels clicking though he was in civilian shoes. "General Washington, sir," he said, his voice crisp. General Washington's head tilted. "Captain, do I know you?" "Captain David Hawke Harris, sir. 501st. You pulled my unit out of a situation in Kandahar, 2011, a C-130 full of rocket-propelled grenades." The general's eyes widened. Hawke Harris. My godson. He broke his stance and stepped forward, pulling Harris into a bone-crushing hug. "I thought you'd re-upped your flying. It's a living sir." Harris smiled, clapping the general on the back. "And I had the distinct honor of flying your daughter today." The general released him and turned to Maya, pulling her into a hug that threatened to crack a rib. "You okay, baby girl? Your text. I was worried." "I'm okay, Dad. Really, I am." "She's more than okay, sir." Captain Harris said, his voice turning serious. "But we had a problem in Atlanta. A problem I need to discuss with this gentleman." He turned to the man in the suit, who flinched. "Mr. Davies," Harris said, "this is General Washington, and this is his daughter, Maya." Mr. Davies, the Apex Air Boston station manager, looked like he was about to be sick. "General Ms. Washington, on behalf of Apex Air, I cannot apologize enough. What you experienced was... It was what Mr. Davies," General Washington asked, his voice soft. "It was racist, sir," Mr. Davies said, choosing his words carefully. "It was fraudulent, and it was above all a complete failure of our standards." "Yes, it was," the general agreed, his voice still quiet. "So what are we doing about it?" "Captain Harris's report was thorough," Davies said, wiping his brow. "We pulled Ms. Susan Miller's file before the plane was even at cruising altitude. This wasn't the first time. It was, however, the most egregious. And the last." "So she's suspended?" Maya asked, finding her voice. Mr. Davies looked at General Washington, then at Maya. "Ms. Washington, Susan Miller was terminated for cause before your flight crossed the Carolina state line. Her security access was revoked, and she was escorted from the Atlanta airport by Port Authority police." "Good," Captain Harris said. "But it's a bit more than that." Davies continued, his voice dropping. "It seems Ms. Miller wasn't just a bigot. She was running a scheme, trading premium seats for cash for gifts. The standby couple, the Petersons, were not her friends. They paid her $500 in gift cards to get those seats, your seats. They are currently being interviewed by the Massachusetts State Police, as is our flight attendant, Mr. Jennings, who we believe was her accomplice on the aircraft, looking the other way for a cut." Maya and her father stared, stunned. This was bigger than one act of racism. This was a criminal conspiracy. "So the hard karma," General Washington said, "is that she wasn't just fired for being a racist. She was arrested for being a criminal." "Yes, sir," Davies said. "Fraud, wire fraud, and several other charges are being discussed. Apex is pursuing this to the full extent of the law. It's one thing to be a terrible person. It's another to steal from the company and our passengers." The 737 connected with the jet bridge at Boston Logan Gate B-24 with a heavy final thud. The ding of the seatbelt sign was followed almost instantly by the authoritative voice of Jennifer, the head flight attendant, cutting through the cabin. "All passengers please remain seated. The captain and our guest in 1A will be deplaning first. We will begin general deplaning shortly. Thank you for your patience." The cabin, which had been buzzing with the sound of unbuckling belts and zipping bags, fell into a confused silence. Passengers craned their necks, their curiosity palpable. They had been audience to a drama, and they were not being allowed to leave before the curtain call. In the first-class cabin, Captain David Harris emerged from the cockpit, his hat now set firmly and squarely on his head. He looked every inch the man in command. He paused at 1A, where Maya was already standing, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready, Ms. Washington?" he asked. His voice was all business, but his eyes were kind. "Ready, Captain?" Maya said, her voice small but firm. He nodded once, then walked to the main aircraft door. He didn't wait for the gate agent to open it. He unlatched it himself with a decisive thwack of the lever. The cool, stale air of the jet bridge rushed in. Captain Harris stepped into the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He looked out, and his entire posture changed. He wasn't a pilot anymore. He was a soldier. He took a half step back, his body language shifting to one of profound respect. "He's here," he said, just loud enough for Maya to hear. He stepped fully onto the jet bridge. Maya followed her heart, hammering against her ribs like it wanted to escape. The jet bridge was long, sterile, and lit with unflattering fluorescent lights. At the end where the carpet of the terminal began, stood two men. One man was the physical embodiment of corporate panic. He was in his late 50s, his expensive suit rumpled from a day of stress, his tie loosened. He was already sweating, dabbing at his upper lip with a handkerchief and clutching a tablet computer like it was a shield. His eyes, wide and nervous, darted from the plane to the terminal and back. The other man was an island of perfect, terrifying calm. He wasn't in uniform. He was in a simple black polo shirt, dark jeans, and a light jacket. But he stood with a stillness that seemed to suck all the anxious energy out of the air. He was tall. His arms crossed his face, a mask of paternal concern. This was General James Iron Hand Washington, retired. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, found Maya. The mask broke. A wave of relief and love washed over his features. But as Maya and the uniformed captain drew closer, his gaze shifted to the man beside her. His brow furrowed in confusion, then in sharp, sudden recognition. Captain Harris stopped 3 feet from him. He didn't offer a handshake. He snapped to an attention stance, his heels clicking on the industrial carpet. It was a sound that echoed with the force of military discipline. "General Washington, sir," Harris said. His voice was a crisp salute. The general's head tilted. He studied the pilot's face, the 4 stripes on his shoulder, the name tag. "Captain? My God. Do I know you?" "Captain David Hawk Harris, sir," Harris said. 501st Air Refueling Wing, Kandahar, 2011. You pulled my C-130 crew and a very problematic cargo out of the fire when our engines got shot to hell. I was the co-pilot." The general's face split into a disbelieving grin. Hawk Harris, I'll be damned." He broke his stance and stepped forward, grabbing Harris in a sudden bone-crushing hug. "Son, I thought you'd be flying an F-35 by now, not a bus." "It's a living, sir," Harris said, laughing as the general clapped him on the back. "And a good one. But I had the distinct honor, and I do mean honor, of flying your daughter today." The laughter vanished. The general released Harris and turned to Maya, pulling her into a hug that felt like a fortress. "You okay, baby girl?" "Your text, it had me worried. I've been on the phone with Apex for 3 hours. I'm okay, Dad. Really, I am." "Now?" "She's more than okay, sir." Captain Harris said, his voice becoming a low, dangerous growl. He turned, and all three of them, the general, the captain, and Maya, fixed their gaze on the sweating man in the suit. "We had a problem in Atlanta," Harris stated. "A problem I need to discuss with this gentleman." He just purred. "Mr. Davies, I presume the Boston station manager." Mr. Davies, the man in the suit, looked like he was about to faint. He practically stumbled forward. "Yes, Captain. Yes, General Washington. Ms. Washington." He held out a trembling hand, which the general completely ignored. On behalf of Apex Air," Davies stammered. "I cannot. We are profoundly sorry. What you experienced, Ms. Washington, it was unacceptable. It's not who we are." "Stop," General Washington said. The word was not loud, but it had the flat, absolute authority of a command that expected to be obeyed. "Mr. Household." Davies's mouth snapped shut. "Mr. Davies," the general said, his voice soft, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. "I've heard a lot of apologies in my career. They're wind. I'm not interested in who you are. I'm interested in an accounting. I want to know what you are doing. Specifically, what happened to the woman named Susan Miller?" Maya watched, fascinated and terrified. This was the Iron Hand she had only heard stories about. This was the man who negotiated treaties and stared down warlords. He wasn't her dad right now. He was a force of nature. Mr. Davies swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. So Captain Harris's in-flight report was, well, it was a bomb. It landed on the CEO's desk before the plane reached cruising altitude. We immediately pulled Ms. Miller's file. And, the general pushed. And it was bad, Davies admitted. A long history of passenger complaints. Dozens. Disproportionately, sir, from passengers of color. Young people. People flying on non-US passports. All of them. Unsubstantiated. All of them dismissed by her supervisor, who I might add is also being investigated. "So you're suspending her," Maya said, finding her voice. It sounded small, but it cut through. "She gets a paid vacation for being a racist." Mr. Davies's eyes snapped to her, and for the first time, he looked genuinely pained. "Ms. Washington." "No. Susan Miller was not suspended. Our VP of Eastern Operations called her at the gate podium in Atlanta while your flight was over Tennessee. She was terminated for cause effective immediately. Her security badge was deactivated mid-call. She was told to gather her personal effects." "Good," Captain Harris said, his arms crossed. "But it's more than that," Davies said, his voice dropping. He looked around as if to see if any passengers were listening from the plane. "When we told her she was fired, she threatened to sue. She said she was just doing her job and making the airline money. She implicated herself, ma'am." "Implicated?" the general said, his eyes narrowing. "It wasn't just racism, General. It was a crime." Davies said, the words rushing out. "It turns out Susan Miller wasn't just doing favors. She was running a black market. The Petersons in 8A and 8B, they weren't her friends. They were clients. They confessed to our ground security in Atlanta. They paid her $500 in Visa gift cards to get those seats. Your seats, Ms. Washington." Maya's jaw dropped. She sold my seat. She's been doing it for years, apparently," Davies said, shaking his head. "Trading premium seats for cash, for gift cards, for hotel vouchers. We found Venmo transactions. We found a lot." So when Ms. Miller was escorted from the terminal, it wasn't by Apex Security. It was by the Atlanta Port Authority Police. She is currently in custody, sir. In custody, the general repeated, tasting the words. Yes, sir. The Atlanta DA is enthusiastic. They're talking wire fraud theft by deception, and because it's an airport, they're even looking at federal charges. The karma, sir. It's as hard as it gets. She wasn't just fired for her bigotry. She's going to jail for her greed. A long silence settled over the jet bridge. Maya let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding. It wasn't just justice. It was consequence. Captain Harris broke the silence. And the flight attendant Mark Jennings. Davies's face soured. Mr. Jennings, her inside man. His file was just as bad. We believe he was her accomplice on the aircraft, confirming the illegal seat swaps handling, or mishandling, the passenger complaints to make them go away. He got a cut. His employment is also terminated. We've flagged his file with the FAA and all other major US carriers. He's finished. He will be lucky if he isn't named as a co-defendant in Ms. Miller's fraud case. And the Petersons? Maya asked. Banned from Apex Air for life, Davies said instantly, and they're cooperating very fully with the Atlanta PD to avoid being charged as accessories. They sang like canaries. Finally, Mr. Davies looked like he could breathe. He had delivered the payload, and it had been satisfactory. He moved into the final phase of his mission. General Ms. Washington, our CEO, Mr. Chen, has been on the phone with your father, sir. He's already approved this. He handed a thick, expensive-looking envelope to Maya. That is a full cash refund for your flight. That is also a certified check for $10,000 made out as a donation in your name to the MIT STEM program you're attending. He handed a second, smaller envelope to the general. And for you and your family, sir, 1 million loyalty miles, and Mr. Chen's personal cell phone number. He would also like to personally fly to Boston tonight to apologize to you both. The general held up a hand. That won't be necessary, Mr. Davies. What is necessary is that you fix your broken system. This thing with Miller grew because no one was watching. The complaints were ignored. Fix it. Yes, sir, Davies whispered. We are. The general's iron hand persona finally melted away. He turned to Captain Harris, and he was just a father again, a grateful one. Hawk, he said, his voice thick, you did more than fly a plane today. You took care of my little girl. I just followed the code, sir, Harris said, standing a little taller. You taught us yourself. Never leave a soldier behind. She's your daughter. She's family. And we don't leave family in 34E. Maya finally understood. Captain Harris hadn't just helped her because he was a good man. He had helped her because he was one of her father's men. He was a member of the same tribe, bound by the same code. He was an extension of her father's own protective will, a guardian she never knew she had. She stepped forward past her father. Thank you, Captain Harris, she said, her voice clear and strong. You saved me. Not just the seat. You made me feel seen. Captain Harris gave her a formal, respectful nod, but his eyes were warm. It was my honor, Ms. Washington. Now go show MIT what you're made of. General Washington put his arm around Maya's shoulder, pulling her close. Let's get your bags, baby girl. We're burning daylight. They turned and walked away. A father and daughter leaving the chaos behind them. Mr. Davies, left alone with the pilot, let out a shaky sigh and wiped his forehead. My God, Captain. Thank you. You handled that perfectly. You may have just saved this airline from a lawsuit that would have cost millions. Captain Harris adjusted his hat, his gaze turning back toward the plane where 298 passengers were waiting. "I wasn't trying to save the airline, Mr. Davies," he said, his voice cold. "I was saving a kid from a bully." He turned and walked back onto his aircraft, a king returning to his castle. "Now, if you'll excuse me," he said over his shoulder. "I have a plane full of people to deplane. And then I believe I have a final conversation to have with Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, who are still in 8A. What a story. It just goes to show you that you never know who you're talking to. A moment of prejudice, a disgusting abuse of power, and Susan Miller's life was over. She lost her job, her freedom, and her future, all because she couldn't see past the color of a young girl's skin. But the real hero here is Captain Harris. He remembered his code. He saw an injustice and he acted. He showed us all what integrity looks like. This story is a powerful reminder that karma is real, and sometimes it wears a pilot's uniform. What do you think of Susan's karma? Was it enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of justice, please hit that like button. Share it with a friend who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications. We drop new real-life drama and karma stories every single day, and you don't want to miss the next one.